Okay, hi. I just had this idea to do this advent of code thing. I've never done this before, but we're going to take a stab at this challenge. So today's prompt is basically what we have is these different amounts of calories that it talks about, and each separation is a new elf who brings a different amount of snacks with a different amount of calories. And what it wants us to do is add up all these separate amounts and find which elf has the most calories. So my general idea is we need a some sort of array of elves' calories. And then what we need to do is, I'm thinking we'll do a for each loop. Would look like this. Okay, so that is a great place to start. Now we just need to figure out how do we separate each of these. For each calorie entry in elves in elves calories, we can say alrighty, so I took a bit of a stab at it here, and you can see what I've got is I switched the second list out for a list rather than an array of ints, and so this way I can add to it nicely when I want to add a new elf to the total count. But basically what I'm doing is that I have a list of what you can essentially call the raw data here. And so this is where all this stuff will get plugged into this array of ints. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna circle through these elves calories list. So for each calorie entry in the elves calorie, if it does not equal 0, so if it's not one of these blank sections, I'm going to take that amount of calories and add it to this int, which is called the current elves calories count. Now it's gonna keep going through every item in this list until it does equal 0. Now if it does equal 0, I'm gonna say elves total list, the second list, is going to add a new entry which is equal to the current amount. And then what I want to do is I want to actually set this to equal 0 again. And so then it's going to go through, it's going to say it doesn't equal 0, and then it's going to continue to add all the way through until it gets to the list. Once this for loop completes, it's going to go into the next for loop and say for each calorie entry in the new elves total list, it's going to say for the most amount of calories. So whichever elf has the highest number of calories, which is currently equal to 0, if this is less than the current number, then set the most calories equal to that one. Now, what we also need to do here is identify which elf number in the array, or in the list that is. But let's just see if we just take this data here. So you can see all of our elves data is in here. And so when we collapse this, this should say whichever one of these has the most amount. Now let's just run that and see what happens. The person who has the highest amount has a total of 2,400, which is correct. Okay, so that is the total of elf number 1, 2, 3, 4. He has 7,000 plus, that's 15, plus 9 is 2,400. So whoever has the most calories has 24. Oh, awesome. So that's really great. So now we just need to say which number of elf is that. Okay, so you can see this worked. I should have taken my amount of time. I don't know how much time that took me, but you can see this is all the code that I wrote. I can actually get rid of this guy here. You can see I did this in a total of 43 lines. You can compress this a bit more, obviously, but the general idea here is pretty simple. You have a number of, I'll go back into Unity here. You have a bunch of raw data that you're given, which says a certain amount of calories that each elf is carrying, and then it's going to add up each of these amounts and identify which elf it is in the list that has the most amount of calories that they're carrying and tell you that number. So when I run the code here, you can see the most amount of calories is 2,400, and that is being carried by elf number 4. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 right here, this guy. That was a fun challenge. I'm glad I was able to do it. Okay, so the plot thickens a little bit because what I didn't realize is that it actually gives you a text file which has a whole bunch of data like this, and then it wants you to calculate and give the answer. what we've got here is the exact same code. We're up to 47 lines now, but what we're doing is rather than reading from an array, we're taking in a text asset, which then is translated into a whole list of strings. And so what that's doing is it's reading that and putting it into one long string file basically, and creating a new line for each line and adding it to that whole list of strings right here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take each line from that one and do the exact same thing that we were doing before, except instead of the array, we're just reading from each line of that text object. And then it's the same code as before, where we're taking our elf number. And actually, it turns out part of the requirement isn't even to know which the elf number is that had it, but that was kind of a fun little thing to add anyway. So you can see if I go into here now, it's a lot simpler. I've got my test file, which is the exact same raw data as before. You can see all the same stuff. So if I run this here, you can see I get the same results, 2,400 calories, number elf number 4. But if I drag in our proper input and hit play here, you can see our most calories is this many, and it's elf number 152 in the list. And that ran in like a second. So I'm really happy with that. That was awesome. And now we'll see you again tomorrow.